I'm Edward Warfield. I'm the publisher of Citybiz. I'm honored today to interview Denise Kaigler, the founder of MDK Brand Management. Welcome, Denise.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So you have an interesting background. Let's talk a little bit about your stints at Reebok and Boston Scientific. Yeah, some highlights of your career, and then really the decision to start your own firm.
Yes, well, thank you for the question. And it's interesting, most people don't remember or don't know that my career actually started as a television news reporter. I majored in broadcast journalism in college and had a very short stint as a television news reporter, maybe a couple of years. But I really found, I guess, my calling when I moved into corporate. And yes, my first corporate job was at Reebok in 1991, and I had a 17-year tenure at Reebok, and I moved on to, it was Reebok combined with Adidas Group because Adidas bought Reebok. So I stayed on board for a couple of years. So my total time between Reebok and Adidas was 17 years. And then I went on to Nintendo, and had a short stint at a startup after Nintendo, and then went on to, yes, to Boston Scientific. So that was in 2015 when I left Boston Scientific in June of 2015. And I started my company 3 weeks later in July, my company MDK Brand Management. So I have been completely blessed to have such a wonderful, nearly 25-year corporate careers at those very iconic brands.
So, yeah, can you provide an overview of MDK Brand Management and some of the milestones that you've launched in 2015?
I can. So yes, 2015. Well, one milestone is still being here, right? I mean, it's been going into my sixth year as a business owner, and there's all kinds of statistics out there that show the average life of a small business. And so I am blessed to continue running my company. So it's interesting. When I started my company, we'll talk about what inspired my reason for starting the company, but in a nutshell, so MDK Brand Management. So it combines, I guess, two very important aspects of one's career. So there's your story and there's your brand. And I pull the two together. Story. So everyone has a story to tell. We all have a story. The key is to really dig down deep and discover what that story is. Discover the relevant, inspiring, and motivating details of our story. Because we all have a story, and you hear that. Everyone says everyone has a story. Most people, though, don't know how to dig down deep to pull out those details of that story, but then are afraid to tell it. We get stage fright, we get scared. The whole thing about public speaking, most people don't really enjoy telling their story publicly, and it's so important. And then there's a second part, which is your brand. It's funny, when I work with clients, one of the questions I ask my clients when I first start, I'll say, raise your hand if you think you have a personal brand. I cannot tell you how many people don't raise their hand, and they don't believe they have a personal brand. I say immediately, yeah, you do. We each have a personal brand. The question is, do you know what it is? Do you know how to define it? Most importantly, do you know how your brand is impacting other people? And most people have no idea. Well, they say, well, we kind of know, but not really. So I say, when you walk into a room, do you know what people are saying about you when you walk out of that room? Most people have no idea what people are saying about them behind their back. No idea what people are saying about them when they're not around. So I say, why? Why don't we know? And there are some people say, well, we don't care. We don't care. I say, well, you should care, because when you know what people are saying about you, you then decide. It can go through one ear, not the other. That's fine. You can make a decision how you're going to use that information. But at least you have the information, which puts you in control of how you're going to use that information. If you don't know what someone else is saying about you behind your back, you're giving that person control to be able to decide what they're going to do with information that you don't have. Well, why would you give someone that control? You don't want to do that. So there's your story, digging down deep and finding those relevant, inspiring, motivating details about your story, then having the confidence to tell that story, and then defining a personal brand that helps you tell that story in an emotional way that connects to your target audience, the person or the people you want to really understand who you are. And then that's going to help you achieve your professional goals. So that's what my company does. We pull those pieces together. We help clients dig down deep, discover their story, learn how to tell their story, and then define a personal brand or a business brand. I work with both. I work with organizations, small businesses, and nonprofits and individuals. So I connect the two, defining your story, whether it's a business story or personal story, defining that brand, whether it's a business brand or personal brand, and then helping you make sure that you are able to and confidently tell that story to a target audience in a way that's going to help you reach your professional goals. And I absolutely love it. I love it.
So this is a perfect segue to you and $40 in the brand. So you have a story that I read a couple of times about when you were a student at Emerson, the $40 that really you were in a pretty desperate situation. Can you tell us about that $40 and the story and how those experiences really turned into a book?
It did. So my book is $40 and a Brand, How to Overcome Challenges, Defy the Odds, and Live Your Awesomeness. And it does include a lot of firsthand stories of my evolution from a very shy introvert to my career. But it does go back to when I was a youngster. I was raised by a single mother, two sisters in Washington, D.C. We grew up in Southeast D.C., very poor. And so I headed off to college with no money, nothing, but I had all these ideals. I wanted to do certain things, and I was very naive about the financial needs of someone leaving home and going off to college. So I did enroll in Emerson College in Boston. And I faced immediate economic challenges. Even though I was working, I wasn't working enough to sustain my livelihood, living and my tuition and books and all the expenses. And I'll remember coming home and hungry and going into my kitchen and having nothing to eat. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. I had a couple of onions, I had some Crisco oil, and some flour. And I'm not exaggerating. That was the only thing in my kitchen. And I remember thinking, there's no way I'm going to make it. I was working part-time, but my job was not due to pay me for another week or two. So I thought there's no way I'm going to survive. And I remember one of my college friends calling me, and she could hear it in my voice. And she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no money and I have no food." And I was on the verge of tears. It was terrible. And I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do. I have nothing. I don't know." And I had no one to ask for money. And she told me she would call me back in a little bit to check on me. And I remember about an hour later, my buzzer to my apartment rang. And I went to the intercom and I asked who it was. And it was a guy named Sammy. And I remembered Sammy was my friend's uncle, the friend who had called me. So I hit the buzzer and let him in. I was curious as to why he was there. And I'd met him once or twice, no more than 2 times. And he was a nice guy, older guy, maybe in his 40s or something. And he came in and he said that his niece had called him and told him about my situation. And he wanted to come and help me. And he opened up his wallet and he gave me $40. Even telling the story makes me emotional. He opened up his wallet and he handed me $40. And I remember looking at him and saying, wow, because I'd never had anyone do anything like that for me. And he didn't know me much at all. And he said, "I want to help you." And he took me to the grocery store and we spent $40 and bought groceries. And it was that moment that I realized the importance of people making an investment in someone. And this guy, Sammy, made an investment in me. And so I felt an obligation to doing something with my life, with my career, and then paying it forward. And so I wrote my book. And that's why I named my book $40 in a Brand, because the book is full of stories, tips, steps, exercises, activities to help individuals who have faced obstacles, who have faced challenges, define their brand, find ways that they can define who they want to be, why they want to be, and overcome those challenges and go on and live their awesomeness and have an incredible career.
Thanks for sharing that with us. How have you responded over the last year to COVID-19? What has been the impact on your business, and how have you dealt with it?
Prior to the pandemic, I would say 90%, maybe a little bit more of my revenue came from in-person workshops, personal branding workshops, where big companies, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, Hasbro, uh, a bunch of other companies would hire me to come in and facilitate personal branding workshops. The prison system, the Massachusetts correctional system, I had contracts with the sheriffs around the state where I would go in and host personal branding workshops for the inmates, men and women, incarcerated at correctional facilities around the state. And I would do those, and I would work with the prison system on a monthly basis, and that happened throughout the year. So between my corporate workshops, my prison workshops, those in an instant just were canceled. I had speaking engagements, paid speaking engagements that overnight were canceled. And I remember thinking, this is not happening. And my situation pales in comparison to what a lot of other people have gone through. But it did impact me. Fortunately, in 2019, I had begun to pivot because I saw that my business, when I was doing it as small business owners, we have to do this regularly. We look long term, and what are the revenue? What's the revenue that we are forecasting? And too much of my revenue was in the bucket of in-person workshops. And so I knew, working with a business coach, and I had a business coach, we looked at the ratio and we said, okay, this is not healthy for your business to be so dependent on in-person workshops. So we started at that time in 2019, I started building an online component to my business. And so during COVID, I have gotten that online program ready. I've written and created 2 more online programs. And so I have been busy getting the one program that I started creating in 2019. It takes a long time to do these programs, online programs, modules. And I created 2 more online programs. So they span someone's career. So there is the beginning, and this program that I'm going to start with was born out of the pandemic, because I do a lot of research. I read everything, and I was seeing, in my own experience, and I was reading a lot about millennials having to move back home because their jobs, of course, millennials are usually, if they're not the entry level bottom layer, they're not far from the bottom. So those are the first jobs that are cut. And women and people of color also were being heavily impacted by the pandemic, or are being heavily impacted by the pandemic. But the millennial, that group is the most impacted group. I have 2 millennial kids, so I understand directly the impact that the pandemic is having on this group. So I created during the pandemic a program called uh, it's millennial launch. So the first stage, and I created, there's a whole ecosystem of MDK Brand Management career coaching products online. The first is millennial launch pad. So that's the first stage. That is the career launch. So what your first stage of your career is launching your career launch. So millennial launch pad targets the millennial, but it has a unique spin to it. And this is my millennial daughter's idea, has a unique spin to it because it involves both the parent and the millennial. So and I've done a lot of research, and I haven't found a program quite like this yet. I don't want to go into too many details because it will launch in March, but that is Millennial Launchpad, and that targets the millennial and their parent. That's a 4-week program, online program. And then there's career development. That's the next stage. And that is for early careers. And that program is, as you mentioned, that before the break. So before you can break through, what are those key elements that you should learn about yourself before you can begin to climb up and through the glass ceiling? There are certain aspects of your own self that you need to understand, that you should understand. And so that's before the break. And that's a 4-week program that targets early careerists. And then you mentioned mainstream, the top tier. That's a career advancement program. And that targets that mid-level professional and business owner. And that's a 10-week program. It's 5 modules and 5 live coaching sessions with me. I have a program right now going on, a 10-week program right now, but my next 10-week program is set to launch in March. Going back to before the break, that is a 4-week program. That is a recurring program. So that resets every 4 weeks or every month. The first Monday, I think it's the first Monday of every month, that program resets. And so before the break, so it's Millennium Launchpad, before the break, mainstream, the top tier, career launch, career development, and career advancement. Yeah.
So you have a workshop planned for the end of this month. Can you tell us about that workshop?
I do. I love doing it's a free workshop, and I do enjoy doing free workshops. And that's another thing I did a lot of during the pandemic. I do a lot of Facebook Lives. I did a Facebook Live session called 30 Tools in 30 Days. So I did 30 days, and I gave away a free tool to develop your personal brand and reach your professional goals every day during the month of April. Then I did another webinar or Facebook Live series in May. And I've done some more, and I've done webinars over the past few months. And so the end of January 29th, I'm doing another free webinar, 90-minute webinar. It's called How to Impact and Impress in Minutes. And I mentioned earlier, I read a lot. I read a lot of research, and I was reading some research a few weeks ago, and it stated that, and it was really fascinating. And I've worked in corporate for almost 25 years, so I understand a lot of this. But this statistic really was interesting. 52% of interviewers make up their mind about a job candidate within 15 minutes of the interview. So you have 15 minutes to make an impact and an impression on that interviewer. So that is not a lot of time. So it's not about like talking. You have to go in there with a deliberate strategic plan. What am I going to say and when? So my workshop at the end of this month, Friday from noon to 1:30, will outline 5 tips on how to make an immediate impact and leave a lasting impression within that first 15 critical minutes of a job interview. And I am targeting people who have been impacted by COVID-19. So people who have been furloughed or laid off because of COVID. My challenge, if you will, is I guess I want to make sure that people come to the workshop and not be afraid or ashamed to come to a workshop that targets people who've been laid off or furloughed. Because I can tell you, there are so many people who have been down the road. I have lost my job. I mean, my job at Boston Scientific was eliminated when I was doing well, but they had a corporate reorganization. It was the best thing that happened to me, though. And they say that, everything happens for a reason, but sometimes you don't understand what that reason is until long after it happens, because you're so caught in the moment that you're upset. It's an emotional, stab in the stomach to lose your job for whatever reason you've lost your job. It doesn't matter the reason. The fact is you've lost your job, and it's an emotional, impact that happens to us. It's a mind game that we're in the midst of when we get laid off. Like, what do we do as far as our mental health when something devastating like losing your job happens? And I've been there. And so my hope is that people come to this workshop and know that there are people like me who are there to help them, who want them to move on with confidence. So if they on my website, mdkbrandmanagement.com, there is a link to go on and register for the workshop, both for the individual who's been impacted, but also for companies. There are companies out there who had to make that unfortunate decision to lay off or furlough employees. And I really want companies to invite their employees, their former team members, to come and participate in this workshop. And maybe it can be one of the benefits that they're offering their former employees, a package or exit package, something that can help them move on with confidence and show their former employee that they care about helping them with their future.
So, what are your growth plans for 2021 and the foreseeable future?
One is to be here in 2022. So my growth plan, so my workshops, my online virtual programs. I don't know, who knows what 2021 is going to, the impact that 2021 is going to have on small businesses, either positive or negative. I guess it depends on the success of the vaccine rollout and how many people, take the vaccine, and when things are going to open up. When am I going to be able to go back in house and do in-person workshops with my clients? The good thing is that several of my clients have brought me back, but we have transitioned my in-person workshops to virtual, and that has gone well. So that's been great, to have my clients come back and say, hey, we want to work with you again. Can you do the same workshop but do it virtually for a new group of employees? And of course, I say yes. And there were a couple clients where it took a little bit of work. There are differences between doing something in person, doing things online, but I figured out how to pivot and make that transition. So I want to be able to do more of that, work with clients that maybe had been used to having people do in-person workshops, doing things now virtually, because who knows what's going to happen. And I want to grow these programs, my career launch and career development and career advancement online virtual programs. So between Millennial Launchpad and Mainstream the Top Tier, and before the break, or I guess it's Millennial Launchpad before the break and Mainstream the Top Tier.
So, a question that was not I hadn't given to you, but what are your children up to?
So thank you for asking. My daughter, Danielle, she lives in Austin, Texas. She has been, unfortunately, impacted, and so she's looking. And so, because Millennial Launchpad, if you will, started with the two of us doing what now has turned into Millennial Launchpad. And again, it was my daughter who said, Mommy, maybe we can make this into an online program because it's helping me. Maybe it can help other millennials. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's such a great idea. And that's what we did. So she's in charge of building that program. So she works with me with MDK Brand Management. She does social media. So she is a social media consultant for MDK. My son, Joey, he's in his second year of grad school. He was at DePaul University in Chicago. And of course, when all this happened, they closed all the dorms, and he was stuck in Chicago for, I would say, about 3 months. Fortunately, he has a cousin who lives there. So she took him in for 3 months until we were able to bring him back home safely. He is finishing up his schooling online, but he works. He's an editor. His major is what is it? Digital cinema. I think it's digital post-production, digital cinema, something like that. But he's an editor. He does all of my editing for MDK Brand Management. So everything you see on my website, all my videos, all the Facebook Lives I do. I have a program that's on my website, Glass Breakers Summit. And I do those where I highlight 5 glass breakers, and that's on my website as well. He does all of that editing. He is a great editor. So he's doing okay. He's doing okay. So thank you for asking.
Well, thank you for your time. It really was a pleasure. Your enthusiasm and your joie de vivre really came through. So we look forward to sharing this with our audience and you sharing it with your audience. So
Thank you. I do want to say one other thing that's free, that's on my website. It's a guide. It's a free guide. It's called How to Prepare Personal and Business, how to get personal and business brands post-pandemic ready, READY, and it's an acronym. It stands for words. And the free guide is on my website, and you can download it. And there are various tips on how you get your brand ready to explode, ready to take off after the pandemic is over. So I hope people will check that out as well. More free resources.
thanks, Denise.
Thank you, Edwin. Bye bye.